Hello everyone. This is Philippa Benson, the Managing Editor of CABI Agriculture and Bioscience, CABI's open access multidisciplinary journal. Today, our webinar is about how you can become a better writer by understanding what makes a text readable. This presentation is brought to you by CABI, a not-for-profit organization established in 1910, which since then has been providing expertise and information about agriculture and the environment through support on the ground, scientific publishing, and international development, partnering with 48 member countries and 400 staff worldwide. Today, in this webinar, we'll discuss a quick overview of writing and editing processes, followed by a description distinguishing grammar, style, and readability, and then go on to some specific aspects of what makes a text more or less readable, and what you can do to improve your skills and make your text more readable. We'll give you some concrete tips for editing wordiness out of your text to improve the readability of them. I hope this presentation will help you become a better writer, not only in English, but also in your native language as well. The standard definition of readability is that it's a measure of how easy it is to read a text. But what does that mean exactly? There are a number of different automated readability tests that are available that give you a readability score. But those tests and scores don't actually tell you very much about how readable a text is, because they don't talk about the complexity of the content, the levels of coherence among different parts of the text, who the readers are and how appropriate the text is for those readers, or other factors like typeface or information design. Understanding readability is actually a quite complex topic, but I hope today you'll get a start in understanding what makes a text readable and what you can do to improve the readability of the manuscripts you write. Let's begin with a quick review of the writing process. Studies in cognitive science have determined that there are three concrete stages used by good writers: a planning stage, a writing stage, and a revising stage. Planning is when you're thinking about the scope, purpose, and audience for your document, along with the constraints and tasks you have to accomplish. Drafting or writing is when you're generating the text, actually putting down the language that will evolve to become your final document. And revising is self-editing, when you're looking at the text you produced so far to see if it meets your planning goals. It helps to think of writing as rewriting and rewriting as editing. There are several different levels of editing, of course, starting on the language level for basic English and copy editing, basic English for grammar and punctuation according to the standards that you're using, style according to the guides that you're trying to adhere to. And then there is more substantive editing, where you're looking at the content completeness, the logic and the analysis, or you're looking at the context of the content as a peer reviewer. And in between that language level editing in the green here, or the more content and substantive analytical editing in the blue, is a place where content and meaning and language merge. And that's the interesting part of editing, but they're all different stages. It's useful also to start to look, when we start to look at what makes a text readable, to look at the differences between grammar, style, and readability, which are not the same. Grammar is a set of logical and structural rules in natural language that are dictated by social norms. This is an important aspect to remember, that there is no grammar god. Grammar is a human social construct. So these three sentences, the equipment needs to be calibrated, the equipment needs calibrating, and the equipment needs calibrated, are all considered grammatical in different places and context, particularly in spoken language. The last one, the equipment needs calibrated, is specific to Western Pennsylvania or the city of Pittsburgh in particular. Style is also a set of social conventions that dictate specifics of language use in particular settings and contexts. So here you see the covers of several well-known style manuals: the Chicago Manual of Style, the Scientific Style and Format Manual put out by the Council of Science Editors, the American Medical Association Manual of Style, and the Manual of Style put out by the Associated Press. These are for popular styles followed by journals and book publishers, but it's by no means all of them. And these guides document both big and small differences in the way that various aspects of language should be written. For example, how chemical names or biological names should be written, how punctuation should be used in different circumstances and in different fields. And there may be differences in how reference lists should be formatted or how citations should be included in a text, again, in different fields. None of these style manuals is better or worse than any other. They're just different, and they need to be adhered to consistently throughout a text when you're writing. In the context of what we're talking about, I do want to note that we're talking about specifically scientific writing here and technical writing. In non-technical writing, style can refer to other aspects of language where a writer makes choices about words or sentence structure or tone or other aspects of language that might give what we would call a style or a voice to a particular writer. And that's not what we're talking about today. Today, we're talking about technical and scientific style. Now, we finally come to readability. You can think of readability as the ease with which readers can find, understand, use, and remember information. Each one of you, I am sure, has had the experience of reading a text and recognizing that the sentences are grammatical and correct, but as a reader, you really don't understand what the writer is trying to convey. So you have to go back and reread the text and sometimes reread it again to uncover what the writer's intended meaning actually is. I'm sure that all of you have also struggled with documents, for example, instructions of various kinds, how to put together a bookshelf or set up a computer or start to use a new phone, and you haven't been able to accomplish the task that you're setting out to do because the text is not understandable. I feel equally sure that many of you have read scientific texts and struggled to make sense of what the intended meaning of the authors might be. You can think of there being 4 primary factors that come into play that influence the readability of a text. These include the complexity of the content of the text as a whole, the structure and linking between meaning and paragraphs, the structure and syntax of sentences, and the choice of words. I'm going to go over a few specific strategies and tools at the sentence level that can help you make your text more readable. In this presentation, I am not going to be talking about legibility or information design as factors influencing readability, although legibility and information design certainly do affect readability. The strategy I'm going to share with you is when you're thinking about rewriting, to think about rewriting as editing, and to think about editing as having 3 parts. Part 1 is to detect a problem in the text. When you look at a draft, to be able to say there's something wrong there. and to stop. Step 2 is to diagnose, to figure out where that problem is and what kind of problem it is. And step 3 is to revise the core element of the problem and look back and see if the sentence is more clear and understandable from the point of view of the reader, that the text should actually say what you mean. So let's look at some examples. Here's a problem sentence. The car slapped the dog. That does seem to be a problem since cars don't slap. What is the problem with that sentence? Would it be okay if you said the car hit the dog? That would be okay. Or if you said the man slapped the dog, that would be okay. So in that first original sentence, the car slapped the dog, the problem is word choice. Here's another example. These pandas only mate in June. Now, is that a problem? Is that sentence grammatical? Did the writer actually mean to say that the only activity that the panda bears engage in the entire month of June is to mate? Perhaps the writer meant that the pandas mate only in the month of June. So in this case, there is a problem in the sentence in conveying the intended meaning of the author because of the placement of the modifier only. Now, what happens when we get to a sentence like this? Payments should not be forwarded if there has not been due notification of this office. This does seem difficult to read and understand, so you can detect a problem. But the next step of trying to figure out what the problem is and how you should attack it is where the editing skill comes in. If you see this revision, you should not forward the payment unless you have notified us. That seems much more clear and understandable. But what is it specifically that was changed or edited from the first sentence to the second? Those are some of the skills you need to develop to edit yourself. My first suggestion, as you're looking to detect problems, is tip number 1, to look for active voice in your verbs. Active voice puts agency or actors into the sentence, which tends to make things more readable. Readers of English language like to have agency in their sentences. So use active verbs whenever possible. So here's an example. The San Andreas Fault was the focus of this study. There's no agency in there, but if you change it to use an active verb and you say, we studied the San Andreas Fault, that makes this sentence shorter and more readable and more comprehensible. In this example, the samples were analyzed. This is a passive voice verb. It's very short, but it doesn't have any agency or an actor for the verb. If you say the team analyzed the samples, that has the same number of words, but is more readable and comprehensible because it's an active verb and there is an agent for the action. So that's tip number 1. Look for active verbs. That's the thing to do. Active verbs and active voice. Tip number 2 is to avoid wordiness, and there are some very specific things that are the roots of wordiness, and these include demonstratives, expletives, and nominalizations. Now, what are these? Demonstratives are the specific words this, that, these, and those are adjectives, this, that, those, or pronouns, these, those, or that, when used in different contexts. The point here is that when you see these words at the beginning of a sentence, or even at the end, you should look and see if there is an opportunity to put more specific concrete information so that the reader doesn't have to fill in the blanks, so to speak. So when you have a sentence, this is terrible, that is unexpected, those are cool, these smell better than those, that is unstable, and you change it to say, this meal is terrible, that result is unexpected, those shoes are cool, or these roses smell better than those lilies. Then you have concrete, specific references for those adjectives or pronouns that demonstrate something else. So it's important to have concrete, specific nouns in this case to be the referent for those demonstrative adjectives or pronouns. So these are the things that you need to detect and pay attention to and stop and look and see if there's a way to revise your text to make it more concrete and therefore more readable or comprehensible for your reader. Now, another root of wordiness, and you can also say this meal, this cold meal is terrible, this negative result is unexpected, or those purple shoes. The more specific and concrete you can be, the better. Another root of wordiness is expletives. It's often the words it or there. And those words contain no real information, but sort of fill out the sentence. So when you see those words, those expletive filler words, stop and see if there's a way that you can revise. So here's an example. There were 200 samples in the drill core. You see those words and revise to say the drill core had 200 samples. Another example, there is an explanation for the results. Yes, that's true, but you can revise to say, I can explain the results, or Kip can explain the results. So these revisions both put an active verb in it, and it removes the expletives. So the point here is that detection phase of editing, you are detecting the expletive, having that be an indicator that there is wordiness, and then revising to be a more concrete, specific, and often shorter and more concise sentence. Another root of wordiness is the form of nominalizations. Now, what does that mean? These are nouns that have their roots as verbs or adjectives. So the noun discovery has a root of the verb discover. The noun resistance has the root of the verb resist. The noun of failure has the root of the verb failure. Difficulty, a noun, has difficult, the adjective, as a root. Elegance has the root of elegant, and intensity has the root of intense. When you see nominalizations, nouns that have their roots as verbs or adjectives, that should be assigned to stop and look and see if you can revise to make your sentence more concise and readable. So let's look at a final example. The intention of the committee is the improvement of morale. Here we see there's no agent of action, and we have two nominalizations, intention and improvement. So intention can become intent, and improvement can become improve. Let's revise the sentence to change those nominalizations back into their root form and make it active. The committee intends to improve morale. So you've detected, you've diagnosed, and you've revised. Here's another example. She made the suggestion that we do another experiment. that does have a active voice, but there's also a nominalization. Let's turn the nominalization back into its root form, the verb, and say she suggested that we do another experiment. When you have these ideas to detect roots of wordiness, expletives, demonstratives, and nominalizations, and you know when you see those to stop and look and see if is there a way that you can revise or edit the sentence to be active voice and more concise, changing the wordy forms of language back into their root forms, then you have some tools at hand to help you reduce your wordiness and improve the readability of your text. So you detect a problem and you stop, you diagnose what it is and how you want to attack the revision, and then you revise, working to have active voice and few, if possible, or no nominalizations or expletives. So just reminding you that there are 3 stages of good writing, and that whenever possible you should go and always go back and check your plans against the text that you've written so far, and be unafraid to revise and go back to look at how you can change and tighten your meaning, and then move forward to your final text. So as summary points, remember that audience, purpose, and scope matter a lot, those things you consider in the planning stage. Remember that writing and editing are recursive cognitive processes, and that skilled writers move between the planning, writing, and editing and revising stages fluidly. Remember that grammar is not the same as style, is not the same as readability, and that readability is created on multiple levels of content, paragraph structure, sentence structure, word choice, and also other aspects like legibility and overall document design. Remember that editing is a 3-part skill with detection, diagnosis, and revision, and that you can improve the readability of your text by using active voice and avoiding the forms of expletives, demonstratives, and nominalizations. Again, in closing, I encourage you to visit CABI.org for more information, publications, and education. And in particular, I encourage you to visit our open access multidisciplinary journal, CABI Agriculture and Bioscience, and also to look at our preprint server, AgriArchive. From AgriArchive, you can also link to additional author services and education resources. Thanks very much for your attention today, and I hope you'll come back and visit our website and our educational resources again soon.